Start the recording. So, thank you to all of you who are joining us. I am disabling the chat so that just for the duration up until the Q&A, we'll have just the conversation between our featured authors tonight. For the Q&A, we will actually reopen the chat so that folks can type in questions and comments. I do want to remind you that the Village Books Virtual Readings Gallery is a safe space. So any user exhibiting offensive or inappropriate behavior will be dismissed from the event immediately. Please remember that books are, excuse me while there we go. Books are available at the Village Books website, villagebooks.com. I'll put that link in the chat later, but we do encourage you, if you're feeling inspired this evening and would like to make a purchase of the author's books, we encourage you to do so. We would love for you to support the authors and to support an independent bookstore. So thank you for that. Tonight's event is extra special because this is part of our Nature of Writing series. Village Books partners with the North Cascades Institute. With this series, we're a proud co-sponsor of this series as we fully support all of the good work that the North Cascades Institute does. As with most everyone these days, the Institute has had to pivot their classes, their presentations, and their outdoor education online, and you can find a list of their programming at ncascades.org. And there are some fabulous classes that are coming up. For instance, Hawk Migration and Conservation class, that's going to be November 12th. Mountain Photography. Mountain Photography Composition class with Scott Kranz, Wilderness First Responder Recertification, and a doubleheader presentation on owls with photographer Paul Bannock. So all of their programming can be found again at ncascades.org. As this most unusual school year gets underway, North Cascades Institute is sharing creative learning resources from their mountain school instructors to provide outdoor learning ideas to support teachers, parents, and students. Mountain School at Home lessons feature science, art, writing, natural history, and wellness topics in blog posts, videos, and downloadable lesson plans. Mountain School is a fabulous program that the North Cascades Institute provides for kids all across the state. I am a parent of a former mountain schooler, and I can tell you it's really an experience that they take with them for the rest of their lives. All of these opportunities and more are available online at ncascades.org, and you can find them on Facebook and Instagram too at ncascades. All right. And now a little bit about each of our presenters today. Our moderator this evening, Kathleen Dean Moore, is a philosopher, climate activist, and author of a dozen books about our cultural and moral relation to the lovely, reeling world. Her early winning books of essays celebrate the world, River Walking, Hold Fast, and Wild Comfort. Her recent works stand in its defense, Moral Ground, Great Tide Rising, and the forthcoming, which we can't wait for, Earth's Wild Music, celebrating and defending the songs of the natural world. And I want to give a personal plug to Piano Tide, the novel, because that is my favorite. And Hank Lentfer, as a lifelong Alaskan, is intimately familiar with much of the country that Nels wrote about. Their friendship centered on a mutual love of wild country, conservation, and writing. The idea for Raven's Witness lodged in Lentfer's mind years ago as he and Nels spent a late September day on the water in Glacier Bay recording glacier calving. A biologist by training, Lentfer currently works as a sound recordist and part-time land steward for the Nature Conservancy. He's the author of Faith of Cranes, Finding Hope and Family in Alaska, and lives in Gustavus, Alaska. And he is here this evening to present this book right here, Raven's Witness. So please join me to thunderous applause in your homes, Kathleen Dean Moore and Hank Lentfer.
Right.
Hey.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks everybody for tuning in. My screen shows a lot of Kathleen Dean Moore's on it, which is which is a great thing. The world is well served by duplicating Kathy, and if we could duplicate Kathy several thousandfold, the world would be a richer place.
Oh, I apologize. I screwed up and sent everybody the wrong link, but I hope that you'll all be able to hear.
Kathy and I just this morning were trying to remember the year we first met, and it was long enough ago. Neither one of us could come up with the year, but neither one of us, I think, will ever forget the encounter, and we remember it for very different reasons, I think. So I had just a month before I met Kathy, I loaded 30 days worth of food in a kayak and set off from Gustavus with a friend just to go paddling. And we didn't even know where we were going to end up. But about the time our food ran out, we paddled into Sitka, and which is about, I don't know, 120 miles or so south of my home in Gustavus. And we bought ourselves a hamburger and some beer, and a friend in Sitka told us, hey, you gotta go listen to this lady doing a reading tonight. She's Kathy was in Sitka as part of the Island Institute's a writer-in-residence program. It's a great thing that just made Sitka a richer place that Carolyn and Doric ran for years. And Carolyn and Doric had brought Kathy to Sitka. And at the end of her stay, she was doing this reading. And I went into this bookstore and listened to this very passionate reading. And Kathy, as part of her stay there, had gone up to a small community of Pelican, and she had written about that. I had not showered. I had been paddling wearing a shirt much like this, a plastic polypropylene shirt, and my nose had grown accustomed to myself. But I noticed I had a lot of space in the back of the small bookstore, and I had some questions for Kathy when she was done reading. So I stormed the podium, and she was very polite. She answered a few of my questions, and then she gathered up her books and departed. But since then, we have been...
That's not how I remember it, though, Hank.
It's not.
I remember I'm reading away, and here come these two very tall, very hairy guys, and they sit down in the back, and pretty soon I could tell that they had been in the woods for about a month.
Yeah, and but since then, and that was well over 20 years ago, Kathy and I have had the great fortune to be engaged in what feels like an ongoing conversation of what it means to be in proper relationship with this world, and what it means to speak up for creatures and ideas that get lost in our society. So Kathy has hosted me numerous times in her home. I've got to host her in Gustavus. I've got to share time with her in Teneke. And a couple years ago, she and her husband Frank joined my family for a wonderful couple weeks camping in Glacier Bay. So it's fun that that encounter in that bookstore 20 plus years ago is bringing us to this screen together. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it feels odd to be talking to you on a machine, because most of our conversations have been around a campfire. And so I can't believe I can actually see you and talk to you without smelling wood smoke and mud. But it's wonderful to be here. And now you have this beautiful new book. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's, for those that don't know Richard Nelson, you've got a treat, because he's got a bunch of work out in the world, both writing and radio work. And he carved himself an amazing spot in an unlikely lineage of storytellers. He's an anthropologist. He was a fantastic naturalist. He was an intense, ferocious listener to both people and creatures. and he was an artist that took all he heard and was able to assemble it into books and essays and public presentations in radio, and also into stories around campfires. And I have no idea how many campfires with this man. And in the course of listening to him, I realized there was a place for me in this lineage of storytellers. So well, something just happened. We got a screen share. So I don't know, somebody just shared their screen. If they could unshare it, we'll go back to Kathy and I on, there we go. I realized there was room for me in this lineage of storytellers. And so it was a collaborative process writing this book, which just captured pieces of Richard's life that weren't covered in his own work. And it was a real honor and privilege to get to work with Nels to tell a piece of his story. And his story is really all of our stories in that it reveals all of our connections to this world.
Well, you know, I want to start right at the beginning of your book, because it occurs to me as I do the math that you were in the very far north about the same time that Nels was. And your book begins with a story about a whale on a shelf of ice. Would you tell that story?
Yeah, that is my earliest memory, and it's my family lived in Barrow. I moved there when I was 6 months old. My father was a polar bear biologist, and this was in the mid-60s, and this was the same time that Richard was moving in and out of that same village, and he was living in a village to the west. And my father and Nels actually met, and and so it was fun to circle back around, and Richard and I went back in 2014. We went to those villages and realized we had a lot of people in common. That the daughter of the babysitter, the Inupiaq family that I spent a lot of time with, married one of Nels's friends.
But you all went out on the ice when they were pulling in a whale, right?
Yes, and that memory might not have stuck, but if it weren't for what happened after the whale came out of the ocean. But when a whale is killed, it's out on the edge of the sea ice, and there's open water, and a big block and tackle is set up, and the whole village leans on that line and slowly comes back, and the whale comes up onto the ice. And I got to participate in that, even though I'm sure I was just in the way. But shortly after butchering began, the ice began to break up, which it tends to do, and it's a dangerous situation in that if the ice cracks between everybody and shore, you are adrift and you are in big trouble. So most of the entire village was there. Somebody, of course, knew that the ice was cracking and sounded the alarm, and there's this frenetic, crazy dash for solid ground. And it was intense enough and dangerous enough that it lodged in my young body and kind of burned the memories of the day into my brain.
Oh yeah, you know, it's the metaphor is overwhelming when you think about what we know now that we perhaps didn't know then about how the ice is continuing to crack, and that the foundations are cracking under a lot of our different lives. But the point that I thought was wonderful about that story is that those northern people knew what to do. And I'm not so sure that we know what to do.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I put that anecdote in the beginning of the book, Kathy, is the folks that sounded the alarm and yelled the commands and gave the directions to get everybody to safe ground. There's this crack between ecology and our economies, and we don't know what to do. I mean, I don't know what to do to make my community safe. I don't know what to do to make my daughter safe. And the Inupiaq people were geniuses in reading the shifting sea ice, and their intelligence for that environment was honed over hundreds, going into thousands of years. And we do not have the luxury of time to formulate an intelligent response to the dangers that are all around us right now.
Yeah, and you were talking about Scott Sanders, who said the one thing that we don't have the time to learn by trial and error. We got to get it right the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Scott's in his most recent book, The Way of the Imagination, he's got an interesting theory that it's really our imagination, which is just about the only thing that can get us out of here, that we can, and story is one of the greatest catalysts of the imagination. And that's, and the stories that Nels collected through 50 years of listening to Alaska's people and creatures are key to stimulating our imagination in the proper way, I believe.
Yeah. Hank, I want to talk about joy, because let me read one of the blurbs that Kim Hecox wrote that's on the back of your book. It says, "This is the story of one man's apprenticeship to Alaska's northern wisdom and wild joy." And it seems to me that wild joy is a perfect description of Nels, right? He could throw back his head and he would laugh and he would laugh. And even one of his Inupiaq friends said, "You don't know how to do very much, but at least you know how to laugh." Can you talk to us about where that joy came from?
I think he was naturally exuberant. When I talked to his brother and friends that knew him as a kid, he was always just an exuberant guy. But he was not joyful all the time. He lived with an ongoing and deep heartbreak. He was an anxious man. He was an insomniac. And he worried, he fretted about the world and the people he loved and the lifestyles that he came to cherish and wild creatures. But he chose again and again and again to return to a joyful place. And he really felt that that was his contribution to the wide diversity of people working in their own ways to turn us to a more sane relationship with each other and the world. And he saw again and again the need to be reminded of the world's beauty, the need to be joyful. And he spent decades on the board of the Sitka Conservation Society. And his goal, his personal goal, I don't know if he shared it with too many of his board members, was to make everybody in the room laugh at least once every meeting. And that was his contribution.
You have an example for us?
Oh, of his exuberance. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. So Claire, if you're back there, my screen sharing is disabled. So hopefully Claire can make that happen.
Go ahead and try again.
There we go. Thank you. So years ago, I don't know how many years ago. I'm so bad with years. I did a trip with Richard and a couple other buddies. That's my buddy Jake Jacoby there, and Nels is pulling the red kayak. I'm in the blue one. We went up Glacier Bay. Richard at this point had quit writing and he was doing radio work. And he recorded live to tape in these crazy wild settings. Here he is reviewing his notes before he recorded a program on tidewater glaciers. And here he is paddling off to make this half-hour radio program. And I'm going to play just a few seconds of that program.
I happen to be sitting about 100 yards from the face of this glacier on a beautiful sunny afternoon at the cusp between summer and fall. It's warm, the warm sun on my back, and right straight in front of me is one of the biggest, coldest things you could ever find anywhere on Earth. Not only that, but on both sides of me is a mountain scene that would just explode your eyeballs. It is positively incredible.
So Nels, that radio program goes on for a full 30 minutes at that level of intensity. And when he finished, and he had paddled out of sight, he was just lost in all those icebergs, and he was clunking his way through all that ice back to the skiff. And when he got within shouting distance, he set the paddle down and just yelled, "This is the best freaking day of my life." And he had said that the day before as we were with mountain goats on top of a mountain. And he said the day before that after we spent a couple hours trailing a black bear along a salmon stream. And he really was living the best day of his life again and again and again. And you got a sense for that within a few minutes of being in this guy's presence. And after being camping with him, I was pretty focused on, all right, I want to mix myself some of that cocktail and see if I can't get close to that myself.
Yeah, what really struck me, one of the things that really struck me in the book was that even during the time of his dying, he could imagine dying as a joyous exuberant. He could find exuberance in the fact of dying. Do you remember that passage he wrote about what he was hoping for as he passed? If you find it there, you have it there. Could you read it to us?
I do. And I do remember it. And this was written, we're coming up on the anniversary of his death. He died November 4th last year. And this was written over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is from his personal journal. And he's in Sitka looking across at this island that he loves. The sight never fails to make my heart swell. The pure pleasure of being close to such perfection and beauty. If anything remains from me when I die, it should be left on Kruzof Island, where my bones can crumble into that soil and my atoms mingle with the muskeg and moss and lava. There could be no better afterlife for me than to become a part of the island, to run through the blood of deer and flow in the muskeg ponds, to fly over the high peaks and the feathers of eagles, to soak with rains into the deep sphagnum. Raven, take my eyes and see with them. Wind, take my breath and sing with it. Hemlock, take my flesh and grow tall with it. Island, take my soul and twist it together with your own.
Man, what a man. You and I have had a long, long conversation, and I'm sure you've had the same conversation with Nels about how do you keep hold of that celebratory spirit? How do you keep on celebrating when you know that what you are celebrating and loving so deeply is going away? I think about the Swainson's thrush. You've taken so many beautiful recordings of the thrush, and in the time your lifetime, those populations are down 38%. which means that if when you were born there were 100 thrushes in your woods, now there are only 62. And we've talked about how do you hold them both in some kind of balance, the grief and the celebration. What would Nels think about that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm in Oregon right now with my aging parents. Mom's 93. Her mind has slipped a lot. So there's a lot of loss there. And my goal in the 10 days I have here in my parents' home is to get my mother to laugh at least once a day. And the sound of her laughter in a day where she is shuffling through so much loss is made all the more precious by the loss. So the sound of the hermit thrush is poignant because that population is already half or more of what it used to be. But really it makes the song, or it doesn't make the song any more beautiful. It just, it focuses my own attention on it. And I'm more inclined to record it or to take people out and say, listen to this. This is stunning. This is the most beautiful thing a human can hear. Listen. It might not be here much longer, but listen. So it's that grief and celebration, they actually feed each other.
Yeah, that's beautiful. If you can hold on to that, I'm really, really glad. It seems to me that your book is well, let me ask a different question. Let me ask, what is it that we love about, what is it what we love when we love Earth's Wild Music? What are we loving about that?
I think we are loving ourselves, and we're loving an expanded sense of ourselves. You know, at any given moment of any day, if somebody came up and says, what's your main identity? You know, maybe I would choose I'm a father. Maybe I would choose I'm a neighbor, a gardener, a hunter, a writer. When I'm listening, I am so much bigger than any of those things. I am a member of a living community. So it expands the awareness of what we all are. We all are beautiful. We are all as beautiful as the thrush song. And you know, I thought of another analogy today that I can watch and admire an amazing athlete, somebody who can run faster than I'll ever run, or a musician who'll play the guitar more brilliantly than I could ever dream of. But I can see that they have 2 legs like I have, they got 10 fingers like I have, and I'm uplifted that another human can do that. And just like when I hear a thrush, I'm uplifted that another creature can do that.
It's very hard for us to listen these days. We seem to have lost, whether is it the will, is it, or the inclination to listen even to one another.
Yes, that is one of the many tragedies of where we find ourselves right now, is that inability to listen. And Nels was such an intense listener that I watched him again and again, whether he's sitting next to somebody on an airplane or meeting somebody for the first time. There were endless questions. And at the end of a 3-hour flight, he would know everything about his seatmate. And his seatmate would know nothing about Nels. And Nels would feel almost bad that he was the one who got off the plane, the richer person, for having kind of gathered just the richness of another human story. So So just another tragedy of our tendency to not listen is it diminishes our lives so much, because the stories of our neighbors are rich things, and the stories of both our human neighbors and our non-human neighbors. So Nels taught me that there is no wealth that's ever accumulated in a bank account. It is accumulated by deepening our knowledge of all our neighbors.
And you and Nels were pretty much professional listeners. Does one get better at listening with practice?
Well, I think it'd be a stretch to apply the term professional to what we were up to, but we did it a lot. And yes, you can, or Nels facilitated what I like to call my acoustic awakening, that I've been in Alaska all my life. I've been interested in the natural world. I've been out watching it, paddling in it, camping in it, eating it. And he placed some headphones on me and gave me this beautiful microphone in a parabolic dish and told me to hit the button. And he warned me it would change my life. And it did. So these sounds started pouring in, amplified. And I realized I had never stopped to fully listen. And I took the headphones off and I could still hear really well. And it's not that my ears were broken, they were just clogged with neglect. So it's the analogy I like to share with people. If you can imagine, whatever, you're 50, 60 years old and you've had crappy eyesight your whole life, all the trees are blurred, houses are blurred, and somebody comes along and puts the glasses on, everything comes into focus. You are never going to shut your eyes. You're not going to go to sleep. You're just going to walk around and look at leaves. That's what happened with me and my ears. Only I didn't need glasses. They work fine.
I remember being on a beach with you. I'll never forget it. It was in Glacier Bay, and I think you had the earphones on and the parabolic dish was moving around. But you stood there and started to point. And you just did a little pointing all around the bay. Common mirror, fulmar, oyster catcher, yellow warbler. It was just wonderful. It was that this whole parade was coming into your ears. It was extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, and part of Nels's joy was that he arrived at a place where he realized he was not alone. And it's not that he didn't feel loneliness. I mean, he was not enlightened. He was not a fully enlightened man. But he felt such an intense kinship with other creatures that he could go to the woods by himself and feel deeply in community. And he helped nurture that in me. And it's a real gift to give yourself, to realize, to draw such comfort simply by being alive on a beautiful, diverse planet.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking more about your book as a book of gratitude. I used to think about it as a book of joy, but the Dalai Lama already wrote that one, right? So I've been thinking now of it as a book of gratitude. And I remember when I was staying at your parents' cottage right next to you up in Gustavus, that you and your family, your wonderful wife and daughter brought me things all the time, a venison pizza and some canned salmon and blueberries and all. And I finally said to you, Hank, I can't take any more gifts. I don't know how to return them. So I don't know how to express my gratitude. And what you said to me was, then you will have to practice. I have tried very hard to practice being grateful ever since. So would you say that, would you think that would be a good, maybe a substitute title for your book? Richard Nelson, The Book of Gratitude.
Yeah, there's There's a quote, I quote Richard somewhere in the book where he says, gratitude kindles the very heat of life. And Thanksgiving was by far his favorite holiday. He loved Thanksgiving, that people would actually pause with the intent of being grateful.
Yeah.
And he also called supermarkets amnesia factories. And that the gifts that my wife and daughter carried across the meadow to you, they were just passing them on. They were gifts from the garden, gifts from the sea, gifts from the forest. And when you are living with steady awareness of the richness and all the gifts that come our way to keep us alive, there is a natural impulse in when you find yourself in that current of generosity to want to pass it along. And you rarely go and spend $200 at the grocery store, put all that stuff in the back of the trunk of the car and feel like giving it away between the store and the house. When I come back to the boat harbor with a cooler packed full of sockeye salmon, I'll give a bunch away before I get home. It's just such a raging gift that you want to pass it along and say, look what the sea gave us. Here, eat fresh fish.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So would you say that Nels was a lucky man?
Lucky, yes, but in a sense of the word that has nothing to do with casinos. His most powerful teacher, if you had to pick one, was Catherine Atla. She was a Koyukon Indian living in Huslia, and she talked endlessly about luck. It was a key piece of the Koyukon culture. But as Nels came to understand luck, it was really a state of grace. And that if you remained in a state of grace, which gratitude was key to that grace and restraint and humility, then you were lucky and the animals would come and your traps would be full and your hunting days would be successful. So he was really focused on that take on luck. And in that way, yes, he was a lucky man. He lived in grace.
Yeah. And died in grace.
Yes.
Among his friends. There is so much music in your book. It begins with music, with the sound of the drums as the people were pulling the whale up onto the ice, and it ends with music of you and your friends gathering in his hotel room, hospital room, playing the songs of birds. And in the middle of it, there's this, there's just music everywhere. And so I just want to ask you about the music. Why did Nels quit writing? Did it have to do with the music?
Yes, in a way. He quit writing because he was just sick of sitting in a chair.
I can understand that.
And so does that have to do with music? Yes, because there's not a lot of it happening when you're hunched over the screen.
I see.
So finishing his last book was misery for him. And he swore he'd never do it again. He reinvented himself as a radio guy because he wanted to be outside. And even after he quit radio, and he and I were just camping and recording together, and he said, this is it. This is the exact thing I want to do. I'm just listening. I'm not producing programs. I'm not struggling with tensions of cross-cultural communication. I'm not burdened by a publishing deadline. It was really return to childhood that he was an intense, he was a naturalist as a 6-year-old. He was just chasing frogs and snakes and lizards in Wisconsin. And in the last decade of his life, he just returned and gave himself the gift of pure, uninterrupted listening.
And you all called it the Joy Project, right?
Yeah, it was, we called it PLURK, play and work. It was just without a doubt some of the best months, weeks, days, hours, moments of my life. There's just something that happens when you wake up every morning before the sun comes up and you just listen. We'd go our separate ways and we'd listen and we'd come back and we'd just talk about what we heard. And so by about day 5 or 6 of a 10-day listening trip, we would be pretty damn giddy. There's a lot of childish laughter on those trips. And people will go out camping and talk about going back to the real world. And it's like, it's so clear to me that the real world's out there. And there's not much joy in the news cycle right now. I'm sure we're all sharing that we're working hard to keep ourselves and each other from despair.
Yeah.
And what's going on right now in the news cycle deserves our attention, but so do the birds. And the day after this election, my boat will be loaded and I'll be in the woods and I will not see a screen for weeks. I'm just going to go hear what the winter birds have to say.
That's a good idea. So I want to ask one last question, but then I want to ask you to play us one of Nels's favorite sounds, okay?
Okay.
So my last question is basically about that. We are bewildered, we are lost. I think we don't know what to do. We know something has to be done. We celebrate in every possible way we can, and we hold on to the joy. But basically, we are childish in a different way. We are bewildered. If you could channel Nels, could you ask him the question, please? Please tell us what to do.
I think a spiritual moment is any moment in which your sense of self is expanded. Mm-hmm. And the good news is those opportunities are around us all the time. I'm very fortunate to live surrounded by wild country, and I can walk out my door and hear these glorious soundscapes. But that is just one way of many to expand our sense of self. We do it through listening to each other. We do it through caring for each other, both our own family and strangers. So any activity that shifts our focus to somebody else's plight, somebody else's story, some other creature's way of being, that is the therapy that we all need in the moment.
I have a friend who reminds us that the work of a wolf is dangerous and that they have to work together, and that the music that they offer us is their way of coming together for a common purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Can we hear it?
Yeah, I'll play. So a little bit of backstory. This is, if you had forced Nels to choose one recording this one might be it. And we woke up and rolled out of the tent at the god-awful hour, like at 3 a.m. We ate a cold breakfast, got in our kayaks, went our separate ways. And I ended up in the alder bushes recording birds, swatting bugs, giving blood. And I paddled back to camp, and Nels paddled up about a half hour later, and he was vibrating with his morning's experience. And he had gone to a different beach thinking he was going to record birds. And he saw this guy on the beach, and this wolf just started howling and howling and howling, and was only 100 feet from his bow of his boat, and he had to unbuckle his recording equipment, and because he wasn't prepared, and he dropped the end of his cord into the salt water. And the wolf is just howling and howling. He's spitting on there, and he's wiping it off. And he plugs it in, and nothing but static. And the wolf is still howling. So he unplugs it, he cleans it, makes it really, really dry, plugs it in, and the wolf quits howling. But the wolf actually laid down. So he did a little, and he waited a long time. The wolf never howled, and he did a, and the wolf looked at him, but didn't howl. So he said, I got nothing to lose. And he put his head back and did a full-throated wolf howl. And that wolf put his head back and did this.
Now, Claire, I think we've saved enough time so that we could go to some questions and answers from all the people who are listening.
Thank you so much for sharing that last sound. That was very moving. Thank you. So I am going to open up the chat now so that folks can ask questions and make comments. We do have some time to do that. I hope I'm doing this right. So I do want to ask, you probably have it memorized, or maybe you have the book in front of you. So I feel like the quote in the beginning by Brian Doyle just sums up so much of what I've been hearing tonight about this book and about Nels. Do you have it right there with you that you can read it?
I do. Yeah, it's this is from Brian Doyle. We're here for a little window, and to use that time to catch and share shards of light and laughter and grace seems to me the great story. And I'm sure most all of you know Brian and his work, and he also died of cancer, much too young. And both of these men were such fantastic storytellers, but their height of storytelling was only achieved because they were both such keen listeners. Nels to the natural world, Brian largely focused on the human stories that he encountered every day, just in the city park or on his campus. So again, both these men, their lives speak to the beauty and importance of listening. So it was great to be able to get a piece of Brian in this book.
I so appreciate the lesson, the reminder about listening. I feel like, and you were talking about the news cycle and everything that's been happening in the last year. I feel like that's one of the lessons that I have been learning is how we need to listen, and particularly I feel like the message for me has been that we need to listen to each other. But I so appreciate that you are reminding us that to listen to everything. And one of my favorite things that you said tonight was that your ears were clogged with neglect. Boy, did that resonate with me. I feel like I think my ears have been clogged with some regret. So let's see. I'm looking in the chat. Clogged with neglect, not regret. Let's see. Christian from the North Cascades Institute. For all attendees, the earth offers gift after gift, life and living of it, light and the return of it, the growing things, the roaring things, fire and nightmares, falling water, and the wisdom of friends' forgiveness. My God, the gift of forgiveness, time, and the scouring tides.
Nice.
How does one accept gifts as great as there and hold them in mind? Thank you for that, Christian. That's a good question. How does one accept gifts as great as there and hold them in mind? I don't know who said that, Christian. It's in quotes. I would like to know, does anybody know where that came from?
It's Kathleen, Kathy's words.
That's Kathleen.
I think it is. I think so.
From what? I'm assuming it's from one of your books, but yeah, now you're on the spot, and now I'm on the spot because I didn't know those were your words. I'm sorry, Kathleen.
From Wild Comfort.
Wild Comfort.
Wow. Yeah. So Kathy's been she's excelled at her homework of receiving gifts.
You're a good teacher.
No, it's the gardens and the ocean and the forest that are the teachers.
Well, and I think that what you said earlier too about how, when the grocery stores being amnesia factories, and how when you come back with a cooler full of fish, your first instinct is, who can I share this with? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that we all experience that, whether it's, for me, it's the flowers that I grow in my garden. As soon as they bloom, I'm like, oh, who can I pass this on to? And I think it's just a natural urge, which is a beautiful thing.
And stories are the same way. If you hear a really great story, what's your first urge? It's like, I gotta tell somebody. I gotta share this story. You're not going to hear a great story and say, "I'm going to lock that up in my brain," and it's never coming out.
Right.
So that's. I think that's how you know you've received a true gift. Is your first impulse is to give it away. And there are. For any authentic gift, there is no clear giver or receiver. That there is, there's a give and take. It's a two-way thing, and that's how you know it's an authentic gift. And the best friendships. I mean, my relationship with Kathy is that way. It's yeah.
Well, we do have a question about this. Is a tough one. One of the audience members says they're having a hard time listening during this during this election cycle. Wondering if you can provide some wise advice to get us through this.
Oh man,
That's a tough one.
yeah, I share that with you, and honestly, I've been campaigning. That's what I did most of the day today, and I'm involved in an opposition campaign, which is the worst form of human communication you can imagine, short of hitting somebody. And I'm doing it. It feels like chemotherapy. I'm only doing it because the option of not doing it is so dire. But I will have the boat loaded on November 4th. And I am going to double down on listening to more inclusive voices and sharing the stories that open hearts rather than close them. But our political process could not be more toxic. Just trying to outnumber your neighbors is a recipe for disaster. So that didn't answer your question, other than hang on, we're almost there, and give yourself permission to give yourself a break from it. It really is toxic, and we all have to watch our intake of the news.
And everybody should hope that Hank is right, that it couldn't be more toxic.
Right.
Yes.
We can only go up.
Yeah.
From here.
That may or may not be true.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, we're getting lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you so much for taking the time to celebrate the legacy of Richard Nelson. Your words and the words of other fantastic writers that commented on the book show how important and revered his lifetime of work is. I keep his words close to my heart. That's from Gary Bullock. And love ending on the wolf howling, so powerful. Both my dog and cat came over to listen.
Oh, nice.
So lots of thanks. People are going to pay it forward. People want to know if this event is being recorded and will be available. Yes, it is going to be available on Village Books YouTube channel. And I also, speaking of Village Books, there is the link to the page on Village Books website where these two fine authors' books are available for purchase. And that includes, you can pre-order Kathleen's new forthcoming book. It comes out February 21st, 22nd, something like that. Earth's Wild Music. We're excited about that one. But yes, this event is going to be recorded on our YouTube channel. And also thank you to the North Cascades Institute, our friends that we love partnering with for this Nature of Writing series, ncascades.org. Do you have anything else you wish to say this evening?
Oh,
we got time. We got started slightly late, so.
I don't know if I have anything more. You got anything more, Kathy?
Well, I have lots more questions, but we didn't. But I think we went through a slew of them. That's good. I guess my closing remarks would be one of gratitude, both to Nels for the life he led and to you. I can't imagine that it was easy for you to be writing the biography of your very, very best friend as he was passing away. I think that was a great gift that you gave to him and to all of us. And so I say for him, which I'm sure he's also told you, thank you.
Yes, he did. And it was an authentic gift. And we were both felt very blessed. I was very grateful he got to read a draft of the manuscript before he died, and he scrawled a note on his hard copy of that manuscript that I will cherish forever, expressing his gratitude. And my gratitude for Nels, for everything. He taught me to be more fully alive. He taught me to love more fully. And what greater gift is there that one friend can give another than that? So that's a great place to end, is in gratitude. And I'm grateful for you, Claire, and I'm grateful for everybody who tuned in. And it's just so crazy. We're reaching out to each other through these screens.
There he is. I love that picture.
Yeah, he was 22 years old in that picture. We're just reaching out for connection any place we can find it. We're deeply hungry for it. And thank you all for feeding me by your attentiveness.
Well, thank you both, and thank you to the audience. This was very special indeed. So,
right.
So I think with that, we'll say good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Right.
Good night.